Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome to Money Sense. I'm Simon Caudry and I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Ian Khan to today's show. Ian has been speaking at the recent RF CEO conference on Ireland, an event that has brought together some really incredible speakers and provided some incredibly thought-provoking ideas and conversations. So if you haven't attended one of these in the past, definitely do so at the next one. Now back to you, Ian. Your biography describes you as a global top 25 futurist, an author and an advisor to Fortune 500 companies and governments. I want to start off my question with something that I think a lot of people when they hear the word futurist is, what does that mean? And what do you mean by it?
Simon, thanks for having me. I am so pleased to be here in the Cayman Islands. I love it here, so thank you for that. Warm welcome here by everybody. A futurist really is somebody who could be doing a few different things. For me, the clear definition is that somebody who's looking at emerging trends, they're looking at observing what's happening within innovation, they're looking at regions across the world and trying to identify what is changing in different markets. So a futurist can be of many different types of futurists. I specialize in technology and innovation, so I consider myself a technology futurist. And for me, it's about observing data, observing trends, observing growth in markets, and understanding where things are going and educating others about it and really explaining what's happening at a big level.
What was your motivation for getting into this sort of space? You say you're a technologist by background. Is it the excitement of just trying to understand what the future is going to be holding? What goes through your mind when you think, I want to try and study this stuff? Because I think there's a lot of people who listen, kids especially, they think, the future's so exciting, but how do I begin to comprehend what it might involve?
I think it's really depends on what personality type you have. Like, I'm very curious. I want to know what's changing, what's happening in tech, as an example. And I've spent many years in the technology industry. So for me, as it was a natural segue to kind of tend more towards technology. And then I've always been in an advocating and educating position throughout my life. And so it was more about educating others rather than, telling them about the future and prophesizing. It's not about that at all. And so it's the excitement of curiosity and the excitement of the unknown and understanding what that is.
It's a lovely word, curiosity. It's, in a sense, you often, a lot of adults sometimes say that the curiosity has been beaten out of them by the world around them. It's just the drudgery, the day-to-day. They lack the curiosity just to get through the day. But you've managed to get through life and go, I'm still curious. I'm still excited about what it holds.
Yeah, there's too much happening in the world today. I mean, there's so much data we encounter, so much content that we look at, right from the billboards that are now digital and they're changing every 5 seconds, to your Twitter feed, to your Facebook, to your 1,000 channels on the TV. We are totally overloaded with content. And to keep your curiosity alive, you've got to take a step back and really protect your mind and that time that you have available. So I think we have to make an active and conscious decision to do that. Otherwise, you're just running around in a circle and you're exhausted and starts the next day, same thing.
It seems as though we all have a little bit of ADHD because we're distracted by so many other things that are going on. How do you then clean your mind to say, I want to focus and understand this particular point. I want to spend days, weeks, months researching it in order to properly understand it and not get distracted by those other things that we all otherwise seem to fall into, those tricks and traps?
I think personally for me, and I can speak about myself, is that for me, the acquisition of information is not a very long-term process. I generally don't look at, oh my God, I've got to do this over a year or 6 months. No, we don't have time. I have to acquire information and synthesize it in a very short time frame and then be able to understand it fully. Now, it's different for different people, but for me, I have to look at shorter pieces of information. I could be watching video content, I could be reading a book or parts of a book. I could encounter a research paper and go through it and see what the main issue is being dealt with, or look at news or what have you. So that acquisition of knowledge is a shorter process now rather than months and years and whatever. But at the foundation of it, I have to have like a fundamental upgrade to my foundation as well, where I'm looking at long-term information acquisition, leadership. Okay, it's so broad. So this year, maybe I'm going to read 10 books on leadership. Or, if it's technology or AI, maybe teach myself AI over the next 6 months. So there's the fast ones and there's the slow ones. There's the deep acquisition, there's skill learning, and then there's also synthesis of information that I shouldn't be going too deep into. So yeah, that's kind of, you've got to segregate how you learn, what you learn, and how much time you spend on it.
Are there any topics that you think we should all learn more about, that we are lacking in, and perhaps we're scared of learning, perhaps we're nervous about learning, perhaps we're reluctant to, but are there one or two topics, or do we need to learn more about everything?
I think really depending on your personal interests, I would really recommend going a little bit broader. If you're an accountant, then maybe also look at what's happening in other parts of the world, not in accounting, but in sustainability, in manufacturing. If you're a medical doctor, don't just look at your profession, but go figure out what is changing in other parts of the world, in finance, in fintech, in humanity. So yeah, you have to little bit take on a little bit of what you're uncomfortable with, because that's where the growth is. And do not continue just looking at your professional education and learning that, but diversify into things that challenge your thinking, but also don't go so deep that you hate it, that you do not like it anymore. So go one sip at a time. It's like drinking a cough medicine, small sips, and then you will be okay.
It's fascinating because a lot of our education system has been designed over the last 100, 200 years to provide increasing focus every step of the way. You narrow down every step. Whereas the way technology is leading us, to your point, you need to have a broader comprehension in order to understand implications. Does that worry you in terms of, is our education system built for what the future holds for everybody?
I don't think so. I don't think 100%. It goes back to the acquisition of knowledge, of building skills, of being able to do something repetitive so that it becomes second nature to you. I mean, that's what learning is all about, right? If you're a plumber, you're going to learn how to tighten those screws 100 times, and then you know how to do it. Or an electrician, or an accountant, or a doctor. So it's all about that skill acquisition. Now what's changing is that in the phone native generations, the Gen Z, the post-Gen Zs, they started learning things from their parents' phones, from YouTube, and from all of these things which were not necessarily, sit down in a classroom and learn things. I mean, my kids learn more things off of YouTube than they do in actual, structured processes and learning. So that is fundamentally changing how we acquire skills and are able to do things. Now, we also have to perform those actions after we know what to do. We have to do some of these things with our hands, change dexterity, build muscle memory. That has to be done. But I think when it comes to education, we're distracted a lot more. Kids are distracted a lot more. And then we have to find newer ways of imparting and adding that skill to them, rather than saying, okay, you're going to read the whole book and we'll make sure you read it. I don't think that's the way to do it.
Technology is your passion, is your background, is your career nowadays, of course. Talk me through some of your current predictions and your fears, your opportunities, and where you see the world going in this space.
That's exciting, interesting, as well as scary. Now, I do not predict anything. I can forecast things. I can talk about, here's what's going to be more happening in the future, but I really cannot guarantee it'll happen. You never know what's going to happen. I think we need to, let me talk about three things maybe that are great and big, I guess. The first one is for the lack of better words, the AI revolution. The AI revolution is not just AI as in terms of ChatGPT, or you're typing something and that gives you some results, or writing a funny poem, but it's really about the transformation of industries. I'm talking about manufacturing, transportation, electric vehicles, space travel, telephone industry, communications. I'm talking about healthcare, services business, accounting, banking. Every single industry that we can think of is going to be transformed because of AI. Now, we're not talking about cottage industries. We're not talking about samurai sword making that has to be done by hand, and it has to be that original. We're talking modern world mass manufacturing, that runs the global economy, that runs the modern world. So everything is going to be transformed because of AI, because it's adding efficiency to these businesses, because it's creating more expanding services, it's creating, let's say, also more profitability, it's reducing expenses for companies to operate. And so that's the major reason why AI is happening. Number two, the connection within that is, okay, why is it happening now? It's because we are now sitting on a massive amount of data that's being generated on a daily basis. And it's that data that's being generated, the transactions in a bank, the sensor data in a smart city. And now because of AI and chip development and progress, we can crunch a lot of that data in a matter of seconds, like in 1/1,000,000th of the time that it would have taken 5 years ago. So, I'll give you an example. In the legal industry, something that took 300,000 hours can now be finished in 30 hours. And that's changing how consulting works, how banks work, and how many other things work. So that's the kind of transformation. Drug discovery, coming up with new medicines, coming up with new cures for diseases like cancer and whatnot. Something that would have taken 12 to 15 years is taking 6 to 9 months now, right? And to discover what will work. We're not talking about approval of medications and drugs. We're talking about even just discovering what it would. Before, you would have to do human trials, you would have to run through data manually, but now that has changed a lot. And so these are the kind of things that are changing.
And also allows much more personalized medicine, I presume, because you can actually understand an individual's human body as opposed to the aggregate human body. You can get down to the nitty-gritty as to what the genome is of that person, what the cell composition is.
Absolutely. And correct. Personalized medicine is the future. It's where a cure for a very specific condition can be created for that person who's suffering from it. I mean, if you look at medicine 100 years ago, we weren't there, but we know the stories, when they invented penicillin. Okay, take penicillin, most of your issues will disappear. Now, we're not there anymore. Things are very specific, medications are very specific. And so that precision is going to change longevity and how long people will live, because now they're getting a cure for a specific condition.
And perhaps also not just length, because people worry about, I might live longer, but uncomfortably. I might live in pain. But if you can live longer and in a happy state, that's a dramatic
Absolutely.
change. Well, look, we're going to take a very brief break right now, but do stay with us and rejoin our conversation in about 30 seconds.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
On a daily basis, making it easy to connect with you, our listeners. Add us to WhatsApp today, 925-3261. That's 925-3261.
Radio Cayman.
Send a text or voice note.
Message us at 925-3261 on WhatsApp today and get active with Radio Cayman.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense and our conversation with Ian Khan on the future, perils and opportunities that lie ahead. Ian, you mentioned some of your your forecasts and your thoughts on the future. I want to ask you about the geopolitical aspects of this, because a lot of the conversation that comes into AI and the future is, China has developed a new model, the US's businesses have developed a new model, Europe's developed, or some. To what extent, one of the conversation topics I've heard people say is computing power is a leveling up solution. It enables everyone to benefit from knowledge. Is that true, though, in a world where governments are trying to protect their domestic systems and actually almost having an arms race, as we did with real arms, but an arms race of AI and an arms race of technology? To what extent do you worry about that as a concern?
I think it's just a natural side effect of the world we live in right now. I mean, you look at the world, there's polarization, there are trade wars, there are tariffs, there's economic competence. There's a lot happening when it comes to, and it's not just China versus America, but it's also about regional economies. It's about jobs within different economies and regions. So a lot of different things are changing, not specifically because of technology, but because of global trade. We also have to recognize and understand that countries have different populations, they have different labor skills, they have different raw materials, they have access to different resources, right? China's been known for manufacturing for decades now, and very economical, cheap manufacturing, which is great, but this is not the China 20 years ago. China today creates the most sophisticated equipment, satellites and whatnot, and so their game is up, but they have a big population. America, on the other hand, has had a great position in leading innovation, with Harvard, with Cambridge, with all these amazing institutions and think tanks, the Silicon Valley, New York as a financial hub. But then, does it have all the access to the resources? I mean, you look at either resources like metals and precious metals and rare earths, like that's what we're talking about, but also human potential now. For example, if I have a task, do I have 1 million people to finish that task or no? So we're talking labor markets and so on. Now, when we talk about geopolitics, technology is playing a big part because technology is helping accelerate production. It's helping accelerate technology advantage. It's helping accelerate many of these things. And China, by the way, is now also producing a lot of energy, renewable energy, coal energy, and powering up the industries that are driving the technology industry. And America is a little bit far behind because it doesn't have that much capacity to serve as much as it needs to, even within
Western
America.
world, inverted commas, is either cutting back on fossil fuels or reluctant to invest in nuclear power, which is what you need for the base generation in order to just run these things 24/7.
Correct. And now with the generation of massive amounts of data, where does that data go? Okay, it goes into data centers, but there's no power to power data centers, right? Well, if we have power to power data centers, we now have new chips that are coming out, like microprocessors, that consume 10 times more power, but they also do 10 times more work. But how do we power them? These are all the things that are impacting countries now.
And it was Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken, that was looking on restarting that nuclear power station. Is it 3 Mile Island, 7 Mile Island?
Yeah.
Which is the one that had the accident 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Precisely because it needs its own power in order to produce the capacity to crunch all this data, as you say.
Correct. So one of the reasons why China, as an example, has been doing a little bit well in terms of growth is because of the access to power generation capacity. And as a result, technology companies within China are benefiting from that. I think America needs to work on the situation. And yes, there's talks of doing small modular nuclear reactors and other ways of producing electricity. We'll see what happens.
I want to switch the conversation to robotics because that seems to be the future that everyone, in a sense, is fearful of. They're taking us over in a Terminator-style way. But the reality is that robots have historically been quite clumsy. They're getting better. But what do you see the future? And are we talking about humanoid robots? Are we talking about micro robots? Where do you see the future for the robotics industry?
I think the robotics industry is at a growth phase right now. It hasn't kind of reached a basic minimum viable future yet because there's many things happening. There's industrial robots that are working within industry, let's say a manufacturing plant, an automobile plant. There's robots that work in, let's say, a pharmaceutical company to, a robotic arm is also a robot. So that's kind of one type of robot. There are robots that are humanoid robots that look like a person. It has arms and legs, it's bipedal, it's got 2 feet, and it can move, it can lift things in a factory, move it around, or it can be at your home as a consumer, it can assist you. There's different categories of robotics, and we should not generalize between everything. I mean, that's where fear comes from. That's where we are scared. Oh my God, is the Terminator situation going to happen to us. When it comes to, so let me separate it. So when it comes to industrial robots, they're not new. Robotic arms have been in place for decades, but they're getting better. Factories are fitting in more robotic arms, more robotic systems. And yes, now even humanoid robots to do more work within factory environments. There's now a big push, and we see this in the news a lot, there's a lot of hype around it, is humanoid robots, right? Tesla is making them, and they want to be the world's largest company making robots. Humanoid, other companies, many companies out of China are now developing humanoid robots. And it needs to be seen where that goes. I generally think they are going to evolve and develop and perform different functions, whether it's in a farm, it's in a transportation industry, or hazardous situations, or at home. And they will fill a void that we do not have a solution for right now. Are they going to take over the world and be evil? Maybe some of them will be, if they get programmed by evil people to do bad things. But I generally don't think they will be overall bad everywhere. They will perform certain functions that we are unable to fill right now. And how do we do that?
Do you see a future where we might have robots inside us? In other words, tiny little things that solve a potential medical emergency that we have, or a medical condition that we have?
So, a robot essentially is something that can work on its own and perform a function, right? That's the simplest definition of a robot. And it's artificial, which means it's not a biological, organic thing.
Well, could a robot be biologically powered in a sense?
Yes, it could be powered biologically with energy coming in from a cellular organism. That's possible, but the robot itself has to be something that we've kind of created for a certain purpose. Robots, in the medical sense, in the medical community, when it comes to internal medicine, when it comes to, okay, you know what, is there something circulating in my blood and it's going to fix? There's been so many different concepts on it. I think there's an opportunity for that. Maybe in the future, you ingest a tablet and it opens up a robot, and then it's cleaning up your arteries because there's cholesterol buildup in there. It avoids that surgery.
Badly, yes.
Yeah, surgery, no surgery, but you can ingest a robotic tablet. So we have to understand there's different forms and types of robots rather than just those bad ones. And I think these could be incredible breakthroughs that will change how we do things, right? I mean, 100 years ago, if there was a war, a civil war, a what have you war, and people were fighting against each other in a big field, and typically there would be a field hospital, and if somebody's hurt, they would just chop off their arm or leg and bandage them up and send them off. Things are different now. There's lots of options available when people get injured. But in the future, maybe there's no need for surgery, right? So that's the evolution, literally, like in a simple example I can give.
I guess, yeah, in hospitals now they're using robots to perform surgery because they obviously don't shake like humans can. They can adjust for the doctor's potential mistakes. They can directionally go where they're supposed to go precisely. And those are things that we could only have dreamt of, perhaps only as little as 10 years ago.
So one of the most scarce professionals out there are surgeons. Then you get into more complex surgeons, and there's also neurosurgeons. Then you make it more complex. Maybe there's pediatric neurosurgeons, right? This specialization becomes so finite and so complex. But we don't have enough of them, and as a result, we are unable to address all medical needs of our times. What if we had a robot that had that finesse, that had that precision, and it's managed by a neurosurgeon who knows what these robots should do? I think that changes how things work. And so that's the way we need to look at it. Robots, I doubt, will just go and perform surgeries on people. They need to be governed and managed and programmed by professionals who know what they have to do. And it's the merger between technology that's creating these robots and then professionals who know what should be done with them. And that's the convergence that's taking place.
A lot of people who will be listening to this show will work as either maybe own their own company, maybe work for governments. And so they'll be saying, how do I, as a business owner, how do I as a government person, how do I as an employee, how do I keep aware? What do I need to do to prepare for this? What is it that the individual needs to be doing to be aware and prepare for this future that you talk about? Because because it almost seems to me as though the future you're talking about is moving innovatively, much more rapidly in the next 20 years than in any other 20-year period in our history because of the scale of technological advancement. So it's even more challenging for humans. We as humans like things to remain fairly static. We like tradition, we like process. How do we keep up to speed with all of this?
I think we have to, again, be more curious. We have to have some discomfort. We have to learn something new that we have no clue about. We want to understand the perspectives of others and opinions of others. And, there's a bias, a confirmation bias, which essentially means you're going to find people that are like you or that are thinking like you. We have to go against that and look for people in the opposite. We have to understand there's a confirmation bias, and that's why you see negative news. That's why you see certain types of content in your daily life. So with that in mind, go and find the opposite of that. Read more books, read news, but also, read the positive news as well as read the critical news. So you have to balance what's going on in your mind for you to understand the larger picture. And yes, curiosity will shape the future of where you go, and taking action. You have to take action, even how smaller it is. You've got to put action into place. Otherwise, you're just observing and the world is going by.
I've heard a lot of people say, I don't need to worry about using ChatGPT or one of the others because Google answers my questions. But then I presume you'll say, well, but it might do today, but maybe it doesn't tomorrow. Maybe ChatGPT can do it better. So at the very least, try. At the very least, experiment with something that you're not using. But as uncomfortable as it might seem, as bizarre as it might seem to use a different tool when the existing tool works very well, you might have a problem the next day where the existing tool doesn't work. So I guess that's the message you're trying to portray to people.
See, it goes back to our relationship with change. People do not want to change. Nobody wants to change. Nobody wants to do things that are different and all of a sudden get up and do something crazy. We are very averse to change. We are risk averse. We do not want to put ourselves into a position of risk. When it comes to specifically, let's say ChatGPT or one of these platforms, the entire nature of search is changing, where now search as we know it, when you type something in Google and you get links and you click on that page and then you start finding that information that you were looking for, now that is changing. And even Google, even Microsoft, Bing, what have you, they are giving contextual answers to you and explaining things to you rather than just giving a link. So that in the next 3 to 5 years, search engines will present really different results rather than what they're doing right now. And so even that is changing, and it's going to be very similar to what ChatGPT does. So it's not about ChatGPT. It's about you accepting that the world is changing or not. And I think people who do not want to do anything different or new, they do not want to change, which is very dangerous.
We unfortunately have to end our show on that note, but it's an incredibly instructive note, which is change. Be willing to accept some change. It might only be a small amount, but accept some. The more you can, the better, I suppose, is the message you're giving. But take a risk. Be willing to take a risk to learn something uncomfortable. So that's the note we're going to leave on. Ian, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for dedicating 25 minutes of your day to join us here on Money Sense.
Thanks for having me, and best of luck.
And look forward to seeing you back in Cayman. I hope you enjoyed what our island has had to offer.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. With that, just reminds me to say thank you to our listeners, and please do tune in again to Money Sense in 2 weeks' time.